Hey, this is Shane from Blackland. And in this video, I'm going to teach you what to expect when you receive your new Vector or Vector Titanium. I'll show you how to set it up and give you some recommendations for blade choices, and I'll teach you how to care for your new Vector. And finally, I'll give you some tips and tricks for getting the best shaves of your life from your new Vector. And if you want to learn more about the Vector, what makes it such a special razor, please check out the product highlight video in the description. And if you love what we're doing here at Blackland, I hope you'll subscribe. So this is what you'll receive when you get your new Vector. Let's go ahead and open it up. The first thing you'll see right on top is a small care card. And that's just going to show you some tips and tricks on how to make sure that your Vector is in perfect condition and stays that way. Don't worry, we're going to go into that in detail in this video. The next thing you'll notice is right on top, proudly displayed, is your Vector. And if you ordered an extra base plate or a stand, make sure you remove this top layer containing the Vector, because that's where you'll find those accessory items below. And this particular one doesn't have an extra base plate, but that's where it'll go. Now let's go ahead and take the Vector out. Now the next thing you'll notice as you look at your new Vector is that it comes with this black washer between the handle and the base plate. We'll go ahead and check that out. And this is just a plastic washer, and we include it during shipping to keep the base plate from being scratched by the handle during shipping. Now some of our customers actually like to keep this washer installed as they use their Vector going forward. This keeps the base plate perfect and prevents it from getting scratched at all. But this is entirely optional. It doesn't impact the shave in any way. So if you care about your base plate being perfect forever, keep the washer installed. And if you don't, just recycle it. Now the next thing you'll notice with your Vector is that it doesn't include any blades. Unlike our DE razors, we ship no blades with the Vector, but there's a good reason for this. Artist cut blades vary greatly in performance, so we don't want to include a blade that won't be perfect for you. Instead, we want to give you the tools and resources to find the perfect setup for your new Vector. Now speaking of those blade choices, make sure you check out the blade table on the Vector product page. That's going to tell you every blade that is Vector compatible to make sure that you can find the blade that's right for you. But today we're just going to cover the blades that we recommend you start out with, and that is either the Feather Professional or the Feather Pro Guard. And we'll have links to both of these in the description below so you can buy them on Amazon. Now, we'll start with the Feather Professional. We consider these to be the standard blade for the Vector and for artist club razors generally. And they come in this neat little cartridge. And you can slide this to open it up. And these blades are middle of the road in terms of performance. They are sharp, they're high quality, and they last for around 10, 12, sometimes even 15 shaves. They're also readily available, unlike some other artist club blades. So this is a really good place to start if you're unsure where to start. The Feather Pro Guards are a really mild blade. They help smooth out the shave by actually having a physical guard on the blade itself, and I'll show you that right now. Now you can see this guard that partially covers the blade. That's going to give you a milder shave. It's going to reduce blade feel and reduce blade engagement, but not reduce efficiency by much. So if you know you love a mild razor, this is the blade for you. Alright, now that your new Vector is unboxed, I'm going to take it apart and then I'll show you how to put a blade in it for the first time. The Vector unscrews just like a normal 3-piece razor. And it uses a standard M5 thread. We'll take off the washer. And then we'll lift off the base plate. Now, I'm going to teach you how to assemble the Vector. It's a little different than DE razors. The principles are the same, but it can be a little finicky because these parts are very small. So take the time to learn how to do it, and you won't have any problems going forward. Now we have our blade. You notice that the sharp edge of the blade faces that way, towards these pointed front corners of the Vector top cap. and it simply slides over the post as you'd expect and gets seated on those tabs. Now, following the exact same approach, we take the base plate and slide it right over on top. Now I like to put my finger on the top of the top cap, and I like to pinch here with my middle finger and thumb, holding the head together. This isn't touching the sharp edge of the blade at all. We take our handle, and from the side, simply thread it together. And because that thread is narrow, you have to do this a few times to get used to it. If you feel it start to bind or not easily thread on, just back it off a half turn, reset it, and go again. The first few times you do this, you may find it to be a little tricky to get it aligned, but as you can see, once you do it a few times, it becomes a no-brainer and you can do it with your eyes closed. So if you have a tough time doing it, don't get frustrated, just keep at it, you'll get it soon. Now we'll go through disassembly, because this can also be tricky. Now obviously it's just the reverse, but we'll go through it anyway. Keep in mind, I'm left-handed, so you may have to switch this, and you'll be using your non-dominant hand to hold the parts, and using your dominant hand to remove the blade. Now we do the same thing, we pinch, being careful not to touch the sharp edge, unscrew the handle, set it aside. We flip the top cap and base plate assembly over, making sure not to drop it. We pull the top cap right off. Now we have the blade and top cap here. After you shave, you might find this to be a little sticky due to soap residue and water. So I like to pinch just like this. Then we take our other hand, our dominant hand, and grab the sides. You want to grab it just like this, being careful not to touch the sharp edge. And you just pull up. The blade will dislodge, and then you can either easily lift it off, or just flip it over and dump the blade into your hand. Before we can start shaving, I first want to teach you how to care for your new Vector. Now the Vector comes either stainless or titanium, but the care instructions are similar. Between shaves, you want to let your Vector dry out fully. And you can do this by either disassembling the entire razor and drying the parts individually, or you can do what I do and just loosen the handle a little bit between shaves. That'll allow some air to flow between the top cap, the blade, and the base plate. Typically, the only time you will have any trouble with corrosion or staining is when the blade itself rusts because it's left in the razor for too long. So between shaves, just loosen it up, let it air out, and that'll keep your razor from rusting or developing any corrosion. Then, occasionally, you may need to deep clean your razor. To do this, simply use a little bit of dish soap and a soft cloth. Now you don't want to use a brush or anything abrasive. You don't want to use any polishing unless you are touching up a polished razor. But you don't want to use Brasso or Barkeeper's Friend unless you know what you're doing. Now before you start shaving, I also have a list of tips for using a new razor for the first time. And this could apply to any razor, and especially the Vector because it's so different from other razors out there. But really these tips should be used when you use any new razor. The first is that you want to pick one blade. A big mistake that people make is they try every blade under the sun when they get a new razor. They would think that the blade will give them the results they're looking for. The reality is that technique is going to get you almost all the way there. And when you change blades every shave, you don't know if the blade is causing those results or the technique. So by picking one blade, you reduce those variables and can focus on getting your technique right. And then once you master that one blade and master the technique required to get the best shaves out of it, then you can start playing with different blades to really dial in that shave to get it just right. But when you start out, for the first 5 to 7, maybe even 10 shaves, stick with one blade type. You can of course use a fresh blade if that one gets dull, but don't try a different type of blade until you are confident in your skills and in your technique with that one type of blade. I also recommend using the razor for at least 5 to 10 shaves in a row if you can. If you bring in a different razor and switch back and forth between the Vector and your old razor, you're going to undo some of the technique that you've learned and make it more difficult for you to adjust to the Vector. By just sticking with one razor for the first several shaves, you're going to be able to adapt quicker and learn the technique better and get much better results. And I also recommend waiting at least 10 shaves before you really reach a conclusion. All the time we get customers who reach out after one shave and say, hey, this isn't working. And we always tell them, just give it some time. It's almost like magic. After you use a razor for a few shaves, it just gets better. And you also just don't know enough after one shave to know whether the razor is causing the bad result, to know if maybe you just were off that day, or maybe another product you use in your routine is causing the problem. So you need to repeat it multiple times as your technique adapts to the razor and not the other way around. And after 5 to 10 shaves, you'll have enough information and enough experience under your belt to be able to reach a valid conclusion about the razor. This is true for the Vector, and it's true for every other razor you use. Please get enough seat time to really reach a conclusion before you think you know a razor. I promise you, you will have much better results if you do this. All right, so now you know what to expect when you get your Vector, you know how to assemble it, and you know what blade to use. So let's get to a shave. Now, Vector shaves just like any other razor. It's really easy to use, super intuitive, but I will give you a couple tips that are just for the Vector. The first is that the Vector works at pretty much any angle. When you get the new razor, I recommend starting out with a shallower angle, the top cap against the skin, the handle up. But over time, you can play with that angle, and it works at pretty much any angle, so just play with it and find what works best for you. If you use your Vector and notice maybe it feels like it's tugging or not shaving super smoothly, this means that you need to add some pressure. I know this is counterintuitive for you who have heard no pressure when switching to a safety razor, but the Vector's head is so light that you actually need to add some pressure back in to get it to glide smoothly and mow down that hair. When a razor is really light like the Vector, when it encounters hair, it may not have the momentum needed to plow through it cleanly, like a heavier razor does. A heavy razor has that natural pressure from gravity. And so you may need to add some pressure in to replicate that effect of a heavier razor. Now this is especially true of the Vector Titanium, which weighs about half as much as the Vector Stainless Steel. You will probably need to add pressure, add a little bit at a time until you're getting that smooth, consistent shave that you expect. It should be able to easily plow through any hair. If you're getting any tugging or skipping or pulling, that means you need to adjust your pressure. So try that first before you switch blades, because it is almost always a pressure problem when people contact us with the Vector. It's counterintuitive and one of the things that makes the Vector a little bit different than your regular double-edged razor. But by using pressure to your advantage, you can modulate the performance of the razor. So you can reduce pressure when you want it to be smoother and lighter and more comfortable, and you can add pressure if you need that extra efficiency or that extra momentum to plow through thick, coarse hair. So don't be afraid to add some pressure, and you will get much better results if you do. I hope these tips and tricks help you get set up with your new Vector and help you get the best shaves you've ever had from it. We're excited to hear from you, and we know you're going to love your new Vector razor. If you have any questions or concerns about your purchase, please don't hesitate to shoot us an email, support@blacklandrazors.com. You can also leave us a comment below. And please subscribe to our channel so you can get content like this in the future. We hope to hear from you soon. Thanks.